This is a very Italian story. This story, spanning nearly half a century, combines mystery, death, blood, corruption, poor politics, mismanagement, and the Mafia. It's a story that mixes characters who come from various backgrounds, from different places, from different experiences, from different walks of life. As people would say nowadays, it's a story that is frightening, a story that unfortunately still shows no sign of ending. It's a story that deserves not so much a movie as the truth, the definitive truth. The family deserves it, and the Italian people themselves deserve to truly know who it was and why. On the day of Epiphany in 1980, Pier Santi Mattarella, candidate for the presidency of the Sicilian region and brother of the current head of state, was killed. A man who had chosen to break away from the environment and the Mafia's code of silence, and perhaps for this very reason, paid the highest price of all. But if you look closely, that account hasn't really been fully settled. As you may have guessed, this is a story of mysteries, a story of secrets. When Pier Santi Mattarella takes the lead of the Sicilian region, it's 1978, the year of the Moro murder, the year of the scandal and the resignation of President Leone. It's a very difficult year. Well, Pier Santi Mattarella brings with him an unusual vision for Sicilian politics of the time. He wants a Sicily that plays by the rules. He wants legality. He wants modern urban transparency, a stop to building speculation, and above all, he wants to cut the cord with that system of collusion, which quietly, without fanfare, but with proven solidity, held together pieces of politics, especially of the Christian democracy, local administrations, and mafia power groups. Between 1978 and 1980, Mattarella worked on various activities. First of all, to block rigged contracts, all the tenders that could be suspected of mafia involvement are stopped. Then, to break political ties with known mafia contacts who brought in pools of votes for certain leaders of the Christian Democracy Party. To enforce transparency within the regional offices, to make citizens understand that everything happening inside was perfectly controllable and therefore safe, sound, and legal. Finally, to align Sicily with functional administrative models, those that had actually proven their effectiveness. For all this, Santi Mattarella was perceived as a foreign body in Sicily, even more so by the Mafia. For them, Santi Mattarella was a real threat. So our story, after this brief preamble, moves to January 6th, 1980, the day of Epiphany. In Palermo, there's a light drizzle. It's around noon on Via Libertà in Palermo. Santi Mattarella is in the car. With him are his wife, his mother-in-law, and his daughter. They're all in the car with Santi Mattarella. Suddenly, a man with a staggering gait, his wife will remember this, approaches the president's Fiat 132, knocks on the window, pulls out a firearm, a pistol, and shoots several times. The shots are very precise. This isn't a last-minute ambush. It's a carefully planned execution. Santi Mattarella's wife is hit in the hand while he dies almost instantly. The bullets strike him all over his body. The killer escapes easily to a waiting beige Fiat 127 and drives off. The car is abandoned soon after. Why kill? For Santi Mattarella? And who ordered and then carried out that murder, a so-called high-profile crime? It's the early 1980s, during what would become known as the Second Great Mafia War. The Mafia, Cosa Nostra, has already declared war on the state. From that moment on, but even before that actually, the assault against the police officers, the carabinieri, and the magistrates had already begun. 3 years later, Rocco Cinici, head of the investigative office, will die, followed by Montana, Imni, Cassara, Falcone, and Borsellino. But why target Santi Mattarella? Why target a politician? Why target a man who is well known in Sicily? So maybe we need to see something more in this story that mixes too many events, too many unclear situations. Also, because at the beginning of the investigation, an alternative lead was considered, that of terrorism from the far right. These were not only the years of the Second Mafia War, but also, in fact, the years of terrorism. There are the Red Brigades, who are, however, in decline, and there are the Nuclei Armati Rivoluzionari, the far right, the Fioravanti brothers, Alibaba, Alibrandi, Mambro, Cavallini, Schiavardini. It is a spontaneous right-wing movement that attacks the state represented by its ideas, the ideas of this spontaneous right wing, of its followers. Many police officers and many carabinieri are killed either to obtain weapons or simply as an act of defiance. Some neo-fascist groups quickly claim responsibility for Mattarella's killing, but this lead is dismissed in favor of the Mafia angle. There are several informants from the following years who speak with a magistrate, Giovanni Falcone, and begin to shed light on the reasons why. Pier Santi Mattarella had to die. He had to die. Why? Because he didn't bow to the Mafia's logic? Because he rebelled against that very intricate system? Almost like a web of patronage between politics and the Mama Santissima, between the top members of the Christian Democrats and the bosses. Pier Santi Mattarella had to pay with his life for his rebellion. With ruling number 9 of 1995, they were sentenced to life imprisonment as those who ordered the killing. The bosses of the so-called cupola ordered them to kill Pier Santi Mattarella. But who are the perpetrators? The actual perpetrators, the killers, the hitmen, they are never identified with certainty. Yet in all these investigations, the black trail remains. Mainly Valerio Fioravanti, who at that time is actually a fugitive, travels a lot. Valerio Fioravanti, often using a false identity, hides in both Veneto and Sicily. But why Sicily? Because one of the obsessions shown by Fioravanti and his group is to free a high-profile prisoner who is in prison right there in Palermo. Pierluigi Congutelli, also known as the Commander. The man who, in 1976, as we've already seen in another video you can find on the channel, shot and killed Judge Vittorio Corsio. To the young, impulsive Nuclei Armati Rivoluzionari members, Congutelli is a legend, and they do all they can to help him escape. Exactly, first to come to an agreement with the leaders of a neo-fascist organization called Third Position, whose founder is Roberto Fiore, and then to argue a quarrel between comrades that doesn't end well. Fioravanti, Cavallini, and Mambro sentenced Ciccio Mangiamelli, the treasurer of Third Position, to death, and he is killed. The reason was that he had taken money that wasn't his, but it wasn't just money. It was simply the proceeds from robberies that needed to be laundered. For that, Fioravanti and his group's connections with the Magliana gang were enough. That money was supposed to be used for the plan to break Congutelli out of prison. Mangiamelli had betrayed them. Mangiamelli had to die, and Mangiamelli dies. There's also another detail, that swaying walk reported by Persanti's widow, Mattarella, which referred specifically to Kilder, a walk that is curiously similar to that of Valerio Fioravanti himself. Was it really him who fired the shots? Was he really involved in a mafia crime? And then why would a neo-fascist terrorist collaborate with the mafia? So let's make a big leap forward in time to the last few months. About a year ago, the Palermo prosecutor's office entered 2 men of honor into the register of suspects, Antonino Madonia and Giuseppe Lucchese. They are possible murder suspects and are already serving life sentences for other crimes. This decision marks an important change in the investigation. After decades in which the Mafia lead had only been established in theory, that is, the order came from above, but they had never found a real key element regarding the actual execution of the crime. On October 24, 2025, just a few months ago, the investigation took a dramatic turn. A former officer of the Palermo flying squad, Filippo Piritori, who later became a prefect, was placed under house arrest. The charge is serious: obstruction of justice. The prosecutor's office alleges that Piritori lied about a key piece of evidence as early as 1980, a leather glove found in the Fiat 127 used by the killers, and he helped to scatter the collected evidence, thus hiding the only real chance to trace the murderers. According to the investigators, the original investigation, the one from 1980-81, was heavily tainted by institutional elements with the aim of preventing the identification of those directly responsible. The later statements of Piritori, who initially claimed to have handed the glove over to the forensic police and then said he had never seen that glove, turned out to be inconsistent and not credible. For the magistrates, this is an illegal attempt to mislead the investigation, but that's not all. In fact, even though that subversive lead, the one about the neo-fascists, was never completely dismissed. Because several elements are still unresolved, the focus remains on a very dangerous web: the Mafia, collusion, political interests, rogue elements of the state, and unfaithful public servants, a sort of dark network that could explain why the truth has remained hidden for decades. A truth that probably was never meant to come out. Tommaso Buscetta, known as the boss of the two worlds but actually just a soldier from Porta Nuova, was among the first to discuss the Mattarella murder. According to Buscetta, the Mafia couldn't stand Mattarella's independence. They found it annoying, like an intrusion, even during Buscetta's revelations. It's the mid-1980s. The famous leather glove was found in the 127, then vanished. No one knows what happened. Giovanni Falcone's investigation, which continued even after his murder in the Capaci bombing, led to a reconstruction of the atmosphere in which the crime took place. Mattarella, an atmosphere that involved extremely high-level planning by what was even called the cupola. The Mattarella Commission had dared to challenge Cosa Nostra on the worst front, that of money. The nightmare of all mafiosi isn't prison, not even the toughest one. It's becoming poor and having nothing left. Mattarella had hit them right where it hurts. He was taking away their drinking water, the oxygen they breathe. The possibility of reinvesting the proceeds from illegal activities in urban planning and contracts, making more money. That's why Mattarella had to die. The masterminds are clear: Totò Riina, Bernardo Provenzano, Francesco Madonia, and the Corleonesi. Valerio Fioravanti and Gilberto Cavallini get involved in the Mattarella case. Towards the end of the 1990s, they are accused of lying, of not providing the usual alibis, of perhaps being the secret henchman, but they are acquitted because the key evidence for all this cannot be found. Only that doubt remains. Why? Was looking for Mattarella's killers in circles completely unrelated to Cosa Nostra just a suggestion? Or was there some truth to it? In the following years, Mattarella's murder was almost forgotten. It was something that belonged to the past, a distant, dusty past to turn the page on. Christian democracy collapsed over 30 years ago, along with the First Republic. Sicily's old power systems have fallen. Most of those people are dead or are now out of politics. What's the point of stirring up old ghosts? For a simple reason: because the truth must always be uncovered. So let's start again from that glove, the glove that disappears. A glove that between 2021 and 2023 comes back to the attention of the investigators. That glove that had been handed over by the forensic team, then lost who knows where in the archives. It was never seen by then young mobile squad officer, later prefect Filippo Pieritori, who is central to this new investigation focused on him. And, as we said, on Antonino Madonia and Giuseppe Lucchesi. Both are notorious Cosa Nostra killers, involved in major murders and present where the crimes were planned. The institutional cover-up tied to Pieritori isn't a mistake, coincidence, or accident. It's intentional. Basically, someone within the ranks of the state didn't want it to be discovered who pulled the trigger that morning of Epiphany in 1980. But since the masterminds are known, why shouldn't it be said? Why shouldn't it be discovered who actually pulled the trigger? What is there really to hide? It's been 46 years since that morning in Palermo. And what can we say after 46 years? The mastermind is known. Cosa Nostra, the commission. The killers are supposedly Madoni Lucchesi, though something still doesn't add up. The neo-fascist lead was initially considered solid. Then it was judged to be a diversion, an attempt to muddy the waters. But the shadows remain. Some state parts avoided clarifying, didn't cooperate, neglected their duty, and did the opposite of what they should have. The missing glove symbolizes how key evidence often vanishes from archives during sensitive investigations. All this makes today, 46 years later, that crime, the crime of Pier Santi Mattarella. A major political mafia crime of national importance demands the truth finally be revealed. The story of Pier Santi Mattarella is unfortunately not just a murder. It's a complex story. It's the story of a Sicily that desperately wanted to change. It's the story of Cosa Nostra, which didn't want to lose ground, didn't want to lose power, didn't want to lose money. Unfortunately, it's also the story of a state at war with itself, a state in which there were servants loyal to their duty, morally impeccable, people to help, to support, to applaud, and then there were other servants who were completely disloyal, who looked after other interests. But the investigation isn't over yet because there's still a lot to clarify. First of all, who ordered that cover-up? It's out of the question that Pier did everything on his own, as if it was suddenly a moment of madness, as if he had gone insane. Who wanted to cover things up, and why protect the killers? What truth couldn't be told about the identity of the person who pulled the trigger? What role did the intelligence services really play, which in 1980 were compromised, infiltrated by the P2, which controlled and manipulated them? And what kind of interference was there? How much was the politics of the time involved? And what about figures like Salvo Lima or D'Acquisto, who was elected to the region in Mattarella's place? They were involved in everything, beginning with Pier Santi Mattarella's isolation within his party, not to mention the future strategies of the Christian Democrats in Sicily and beyond. This new investigation, which started just recently and is digging so deeply, finally, after almost half a century, it could help rewrite entire chapters of the history of our republic. It would finally be a glimpse of clarity that we have long been waiting for, and not just for the Mattarella murder. In Italy, there are too many violent crimes that still have not received full justice. A lot of time has passed, but the thirst for justice does not subside. All of us citizens would have the right to know, to understand, to find out why, who, and how. But on the other hand, there is always someone who has an interest in keeping us from understanding, from knowing, from uncovering the truth. So I'll ask you one last question. Why shouldn't we citizens know? Try to give yourself an answer. I tried and it wasn't pleasant.